HoloLens goes away, and Xbox has a very mixed week. Happy Friday, friends! It's Friday. It's the middle of February. Actually, it's exactly the middle of February right now, I believe. And so, we're plowing through the month. It was a good week on this side of the camera. Hopefully, it was a good week on that side of the headphone. And there's some interesting Microsoft news. Xbox had a very positive, negative week, I guess is one way to describe it. And so there's a lot to talk about. Got some good questions in the hopper. So why don't we just dive in? Hopefully you had a wonderful week. Here we go with the tech news. So the first big thing this week is that Microsoft is finally, super seriously this time getting rid of the HoloLens. So they are getting rid of, I think the technical name for this thing is the IVAS, but it's the HoloLens headset that the military was funding. And so they are offloading this to Anduril. I think it's Anduril is how you pronounce it. We don't know all the details of the arrangement other than that company will use Microsoft Cloud Technologies, if you will, to help power this thing. And so there's some sort of agreement there, but Microsoft is like, hey, we're out of this space. See you later. Good luck. Don't call us if you need us, sort of thing. So that's a pretty big shift. It's a pretty big shift. We'll see if it was the right shift in the long term as the headsets and the other things start to come back into fashion. But for now, Microsoft is bowing out of that. Something a little bit near and dear to this podcast heart is Clipchamp. So Clipchamp is getting and probably already receiving, depending on what, where you are in life with your updates of your apps, a whole bunch of new features. Now, I say this is near and dear to my heart because I use Clipchamp to edit this podcast that you are listening to right now. So I've moved over to it, although we'll get there in a second. So first off, new light mode. There's a new editing section with updated UI with improved navigation. Sidebar and timeline can now be collapsed. There's better zoom on the timeline, which I can absolutely confirm is a very big deal. At least the flavor that I got updated to, it is much improved. However, the app is a little buggy sometimes, so I will absolutely acknowledge that. If you were dropping large, and I mean large, like long clips, like 30 minutes plus, sometimes this podcast goes 22, 25 minutes. Sometimes the audio just doesn't work. Now, I haven't had this experience in the past 2 times I've edited, but every once in a while you drop something in there and there's just no audio for whatever reason. Now, the other thing that I had too is, so I do shorts, if you're on the YouTube side or whatever. The short that I uploaded previously actually had duplicated audio and there was no second audio in the timeline. I had to recreate the whole thing in a new file and then it was fine. So it's definitely got some little hiccups here or there. But however, if you're paying for Microsoft 365, which I know many of you listening to this are, it's fine for your quick and dirty editing. So one of the things I really try to do is this whole podcast, I try to get everything done while I'm recording. I hesitated there. I was going to say during production. I try to do the least amount of post-production, like all the transitions, all these files and everything you see up on the screen are all done using a Stream Deck. And then I go really just hack the ends off, drop the little subscribe button things in there and then export. So for quick and dirty edits, it's more than sufficient, and it's already included in things that you are probably paying for in some capacity. Now, Microsoft, I will give them 10 out of 10 points for doing this from an SEO perspective. So Microsoft SEO'd the hell out of uninstall Microsoft Edge. So if you want to uninstall Microsoft Edge and you go to Google and you search that, you will land on this web page that Microsoft has craftily built that does not tell you how to uninstall Edge. It is actually really just an advertisement for all the great and wonderful things that Edge offers and all the experiences you will lose if you uninstall Edge. It does not actually tell you how to uninstall Edge, but 10 out of 10 to Microsoft for saying you know what, we could try to hold on to them one last time by making this the top ranked SEO page. And after all, the Microsoft domain is very highly ranked for this sort of thing. So I give them some points for the creativity here, but at the end of the day, guys, it feels whatever. It feels whatever. So anyways, the last thing here is Google I/O was announced. And so Google I/O is their developer conference. It overlaps with Build, which is why I bring this up. It is May 20th and the 21st. So Microsoft will kick off the week and then Google will take over midweek. this feels one of two things are true. I guess that both could be true. Like Google just doesn't care when build is, and they're going to do their own thing, and they just don't care. That is one option. Or the second was this was strategically placed midweek so that Microsoft's going to have very clearly a ton of AI announcements, and Google doesn't want to be left out that week, so they're going to drop it on in the middle of the week. All of their AI announcements to either try to flood, the PR waves to cover up everything Microsoft does. Doesn't really matter. It's happening, and that is what it's going on there. So, that's like the big Microsoft news of the week. One thing, this is completely random. If you're on the audio, I apologize. I put this image behind me up here. And so the past couple times, the actual image from like the Bing desktop stuff, looks good. So I don't know, should I keep this? See how that background looks? I don't know if I should keep the very vanilla. I need to change up the image, but something with a little bit more pizzazz going on behind me seems to look a little better. So I'm going to leave this the rest of the video. You guys tell me if you like the better, whatever the random thing behind me. The other thing I could do is actually do the Apple TV screensaver, which is slow moving. Maybe that's what I'll try for next week, because I do have an Apple TV hooked up to this thing. So anyways, a little bit of a course deviation there. Speaking of course deviation, screw it. We're going to say screw it. And I said it 3 times. I don't know why. Anyways, I bought an iPhone 16 Pro this week for reasons that whatever. So I went from a 13 Pro to a 16 Pro. And I will tell you, friends, you can't really tell a whole lot. It's nice. It's a wonderful phone. And like many other people, I already have an iPhone. The rest of the family's on iPhones, iPad, kids on a watch. We're not moving to Android, so you can get a Samsung Galaxy S25 Ultra or whatever their latest one is. I'm not switching to Android. I had nothing against Android. I've had Android phones in the past, but get it. Moving all the way up. It's fine. The phone is fine. The screen is fine. The cameras are fine. It's all fine. I don't feel like I missed 3 generations of upgrades. The dynamic island is dynamic-y. The 5G ultra wideband works. The cameras take photos. I wasn't really unhappy with my previous phone, but I had some screwing things going on around with my Verizon plan and had to get some things sorted out. And so it just made sense that was time to upgrade. Anyways, yeah, the USB-C is probably the nicest thing. But however, my wife's phone is not on USB-C, so we're not a whole USB-C family. Which becomes problematic. So there you go. Anyways, okay, now on to the gaming news for realsies this time. So this was such a mixed week for Xbox. On one hand, Avowed, all the reviews dropped. I think early access is now available. It got really good positive coverage. It's proof that, Xbox has shipped a couple good games in succession here. They've had Indiana Jones, they've had Black Ops 6, they had Hellblade 2, they've had a couple others drop. And so they didn't have any red falls, if you will. So Xbox has proven once again that they can ship consistent quality games in succession, like Indiana Jones and Avowed, both landing very positively, which is wonderful. And, these are the wins that Xbox desperately needs. The problem is they've needed them for 5 years, not for 1 year. But however, I'm not going to down Xbox for that. They've done it. They've shipped another high quality game that looks like it's going to have some staying power and is elevating the bar of Game Pass once again. That's really, really good news for Xbox, because the rest of the week was really rough for Xbox. And so let's dive into some of these details here. So the first thing, that image is a little small. Let's make this big. This is the benefit. I use multiplicity across these multiple computers here, so I can just drag that and make that bigger in real time because that looks better. So the one thing that we learned this week is that Xbox Series X and S, I should say late last week, is they have around 30-ish million Gen 9 consoles in market, right? We kind of take that as not complete fact, but pretty darn close, right? So they've got that going on for them. And then Sony comes out and says, hey, we sold 9.5 million devices at PlayStation 5s during the quarter, during the holiday shopping period. This is the same time when Xbox had a 29% drop in hardware. Now, somebody's going to chime in and say, Brad, but they launched the PS5 Pro. Of course, they should have a lot. That is a given, although it doesn't sound like they sold a ton of PS5 Pros. But the thing that I really want to point out from the Sony slide deck here is of those 9.5 million, 42% are new users. Now, the question is 42% good or bad? That's a genuine question. I don't have a definitive, like, yes, it should be X% of new users bought new consoles. The one thing we can say is that over 40% people who bought consoles this generation, or the PlayStation 5 this past quarter, are brand new to PlayStation, which raises the question of, like, where are they coming from? So are those people who had Xboxes that are moving over? Are they people who only had Switches and are buying their first under the TV consoles type things? Are they new kids who are joining the fray of PlayStation who had never had a console before? We don't know the exact breakdown. We probably never will, but we do know that 42% is new, and this is way more transparent than we ever get from Microsoft, primarily because inside the world of Microsoft, Xbox is real tiny, and so they don't have to. It's not material from a financial perspective. And so the question here that Sony and Xbox are facing is realistically this. Like, Xbox has told us a lot that, like, there might be a demand problem. Like, the console generation ages 1 year every single year, meaning it's just getting older. However, Sony continues to do very, very well. And so Derek, who tracks this stuff, put together a very interesting slide that is worth paying attention to here. Now, the one thing I will point out is that in 2024, he believes, or his estimates show, Xbox consoles around 35.9 million. We don't know, again, because Microsoft isn't fully transparent, we don't know which is right, the 30 million from roughly Take-Two or the 35 from Derek. We could split the difference and say like 32 and a half, somewhere around there. But I think we can all agree that somewhere between 30 and 35 is likely where the Xbox Series S and X console generation has landed. However, when you compare that to the 75 million, which is a known quantity from the PlayStation 5 side, it puts the picture together a little bit better that, hey, things aren't, from a hardware perspective, like, Xbox just can't seem to get a hardware win for the generation. You can actually see through his entire chart, I should say, that starting back in 2020, it was relatively close. 2023, we really started to see a bigger gap materialize, but it was never over 2x, right? Remember, I've said many times that if Xbox Series X was 50% of PlayStation sales, then they probably had a pretty good generation. But now they are pretty far below that, by the top end estimate, 5 million units below that. On the low end estimate, it could be 15 million if they've only sold 30 million consoles, which candidly really begins to explain, again, for like the third or fourth time, why Xbox is doing what it's doing. It's not a mysterious event that Xbox is suddenly putting games everywhere. If you have 30 million consoles and you have X number of PC players, if you aren't tapping into those 75 million console players over on the PlayStation side, you're missing a huge market. And Microsoft has very clearly made the definitive decision that chasing the dollars is more important than chasing hardware sales. And so these numbers just really put it into perspective about how Xbox is playing out. Now, the question, like, and this is like a pretty sincere question that I wonder about and try to look for data on, is the lack of Xbox sales, is it a demand problem? Like, truly, are there just not new console players and Sony is just absorbing the inertia of console sales that have already existed? And genuinely, there's going to be some new every year, but not like millions upon millions. Or is Xbox just not the preferred platform and just can't seem to get out of its own way? Now, people are absolutely and more than likely rightfully going to comment, well, there's no Xbox exclusives that people want to play, so why would they buy the hardware? That's a fair and valid argument. However, I think the one and only argument for getting an Xbox console today, well, there's a couple, but the strongest is Game Pass. Game Pass continues to be a tremendous value. You can go buy a console today for 20 bones, or even less than 20 bones. You can play Indiana Jones all the way through. You can play Avowed front to back, and you can play Call of Duty for $20. Like, there's no better value in gaming than that right now. However, you got to pay $20 the following month. But yeah, that is, and it's a valid argument. I mean, but I think the reality here is that Xbox just isn't seeing Game Pass being received in that same manner by people, and they're like, screw it, I'm just going to buy a PlayStation and just buy my games, and that's just the way I'm going to do it. I don't have a definitive answer here, but we understand why Microsoft is doing what they're doing. And for the last year, they didn't do themselves any favors to help improve their hardware sales, right? If you remember Black Friday last year, yeah, technically I was gonna say last quarter, they didn't have any like gangbuster deals. They weren't like fire selling anything. They pretty much just kept the same pricing. Now they did up the storage a little bit, but there weren't any $199 Xbox Series S consoles being sold. That was not happening last October, November, and December. They weren't doing it. So they didn't help themselves from that respect. And maybe, like, is Microsoft, I can't imagine that Phil Spencer and Team Xbox are just like, covering their eyes and just hunkering down in their bunkers and saying, like, we're on the right path. This is the right thing. We know what we're doing when it comes to hardware. I'm not talking about software side. But I think they have made the conscious choice that it's okay to sacrifice hardware sales to increase software sales and ultimately profits. Now, Xbox keeps saying, and Jez Corden said that they got signed off here recently, new hardware is coming, and so that will obviously boost things, but that feels at this point, like I think we can somewhat agree, that's probably a Gen 10 next generation console, if you will. They're not doing a rev for the existing stuff. But that doesn't change the narrative of, will it change any of the demand? So, which brings the question, is Xbox just going to kind of settle for next generation hardware sales to be around 40-ish million and be like, that's just it. Like, that's all we can do. We can't compete with PlayStation because once you're in an ecosystem, PlayStation or Xbox, there is a very serious value cost to switching, right? If I get rid of my Xbox, I have a large catalog of games that I've bought physically and digitally, and I jump over to PlayStation, I lose every single title. And so that inverse is true. Everybody on PlayStation who would come over to Xbox, they lose all of their titles, right? You can't keep them unless they did some sort of transition, which would be super interesting from Xbox, be like, hey, prove you bought these titles and they're all available. But I don't think that's the point. And then there's the friendship cost, right? But the people I play console games with, they all have Xboxes. And so, yeah, there's a lot of inertia for staking with your own platform, which is why that 42% number is so important, because if they're grabbing 42% of net sales being new people, that is good for their long term, because selling somebody from a PlayStation 4 to 5 is much easier than selling somebody who has nothing and getting a PlayStation 5. Then they look for value, and that's where Xbox was hoping to win, but we don't know if they quite did. And so it's just an observation and an interesting plateau that Xbox has found itself on. And it's the hill that they're willing to die on, that software sales need to be better than hardware sales. And so it makes sense, right? They're called Microsoft. They're not called whatever. That would probably get demonetized by YouTube or something So interesting business week for Xbox. Again, I'm not trying to be super negative on Xbox at the end of the day. It's my preferred platform. I've bought many of them. I will buy the next generation. If they go to this hybrid PC platform, I will absolutely be moving to that as well. And so I wish them the best. Avowed looks like it's doing well. I'm super interested to see how the next couple of titles here, like Doom is the one I'm looking forward to most. So anyways, there you go. All right, on to the questions of the week. Hey Brad, Intel's latest chips are landing in multiple places and the reviews are insanely mixed, and it's really hard to keep this stuff straight. What is your opinion on which Intel chips you should buy or not buy going forward? That is a very tough question to answer, because there's not just the Lunar Lake chips, there's also Meteor Lake chips. It's so dependent on which chipset you buy these days from Intel that sometimes you win and sometimes you're really lost. Candidly, I think it depends on what you're doing. Like if you gave me your credit card and said, go to Micro Center and build a PC, what would I do? I would be grabbing AMD chips, probably for the most part. I'm still a believer that more cores is better than anything else. So I would, depending on whatever your budget is, I would try to get the most amount of cores for your dollar. And then I want to say, typically, it depends on your workload. Like, if you're running LLMs, then you want to throw as much money as you can into a big beefy GPU. If you're doing video editing and things not gaming related, then RAM. But however, RAM is also one of the easiest things to upgrade on a PC. Like, just to get more RAM is incredibly easy. So I would go with many cores as you can fit on an AMD CPU. If you can get a Zen 5, you're just future-proofing yourself. Remember, if you buy the last gen of the Zen 4, there's no upgrade path. AMD actually did a pretty good job with that Zen 4 platform, being able to upgrade your chip if you want to. But Zen 5 is their latest and greatest. And so Zen 5, as many cores as you can get, and then GPU will depend on what you're trying to do. Either LLMs, gaming. If you're not doing LLMs, and you're not a gamer, because those things overlap a decent amount, right? VRAM is the critical component in there. Then I would just load up on RAM. You can never have too much RAM, but RAM is also pretty low-hanging fruit on ability to upgrade. And it's honestly typically not too expensive at the end of the day. Brad, I need a new mouse for my desktop PC. What mouse do you use on your podcast? So this mouse is not one that I would recommend for everybody. This is the what is this? This is their Ocean Plastic mouse. Microsoft sent this to me for full transparency. And so I use this mouse across these two PCs with an app called Multiplicity. What is it called? Overlapping concerns or whatever. My company makes, I can't think of the word. Conflict of interest. That's what I was thinking of. I work on the team. I run the team that builds Multiplicity, so it's whatever. If you're just looking though for a general mouse, productivity mouse, you cannot go wrong with the MX Master series. So I have a 3S, I think is their latest version. I don't know when a 4 is coming out. The MX Master series is my preferred mouse at the end of the day. Brad, when you play Call of Duty, how is it? Because there's a lot of reports online that Warzone is complete buggy, yourself included, and so on. What do you think of the latest Black Ops 6? So yeah, there's definitely been a lot of bugs. So Warzone is now in a decent place. The season 2 launched to a disaster, as they always do. For whatever reason, whenever they launch a new season, like the first 3 days, there's a whole tons of issues. The multiplayer has been pretty good since day one. I play a lot of Nuketown. It's been pretty good. So I recommend it, especially if you have Game Pass. It's free. Warzone is probably now in a good place. And so I don't like Prop Hunt is my jam. I should live stream Prop Hunt just because that's how much fun I have doing it. It's hide and seek if you're not familiar with this. Like you look like a prop on the map. You go try to hide and people try to find you. Now people found glitches in and out of the map, but it's fun. It's kind of my slow paced jam when you need to just play games but not be competitive. And Warzone is my fix for when I really am in a competitive mood and need to win mentality. And then Nuketown is my grind map for when I'm trying to level up, that kind of stuff, and everything else. So next question is, can you tell me more about Notion? I need a note-taking app, and OneNote just doesn't seem to be... I have not been saying people's names. I just realized that. Oops. Well, we're not gonna spoil that trend right now. I have not been saying who's... I apologize for that. Anyways, I need a new note-taking app. OneNote is no longer cutting it. Tell me more about Notion, and should I flip to it? So here's the deal with Notion. Notion, you can do it for free. It's all a web-based service, so keep that in mind. Obsidian, I think, is fully... Oh, there's Obsidian is out there. There's another popular one. If you want total control, like the most privacy-focused one, I think it's called AnyType, is very, very, and I mean very similar to Notion, except that it's all on your device and you sync it yourself. Whereas I got hooked into Notion, I think before AnyType was really as good as it is. Like if I was switching to anything, AnyType might be up there. There's a couple more like them. Anyways, the short of it is that these things are the closest I can kind of think to it. They remind me of Microsoft Access a little bit. Not quite, but the same. You can have tables in one thing and then link them to other pages. It has a OneNote feel to it. I just like it from a markdown editor perspective. It's on my mobile phone. And so when I have thoughts or whatever, and I use it extensively for work related stuff in our work account and all that. And so it's just really easy to update notes. And I'm a prolific note taker. That's something that I've just always done. It's just always been part of what I do. So there you go, friends. That wraps it up for this week. I just kind of dig this image back here. The problem is that sometimes you get images from the Bing desktop wallpaper thing. I think that's what this is. Yep. That just don't work. But I felt like this one kind of did, because if you have something that's too bright, then it doesn't work. And if you have something that's too dark, it doesn't work. And then the one reason I haven't done Apple TVs, because if it goes in between, the focus of the camera can get a little iffy and dicey or whatever. So anyways, there you go, my friends. As always, make sure to keep it subscribed here, because the BS on this podcast is me.